That's right, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Happy Today podcast with Lady Maga USA. That is me. Of course, I want us all to be happy today, and I address you as ladies and gentlemen every time because there are, in fact, two genders, and I choose to use the phrase ladies and gentlemen because before we know it, it is going to be a hate crime to use that phrase. So I am incredibly honored to be with Ron Filipkowski today. He and I do not see eye to eye. I would actually estimate that we are on quite the opposite ends of the political spectrum. But I posted on Twitter, hey, anybody out there who hates me, I would love to debate you because living in an echo chamber is not helpful. And that's one of my greatest challenges as Lady Maga is I often feel like I live in an echo chamber and that doesn't really help anybody. So Ron messaged me and he said, I don't hate you, but I'd be happy to have a conversation with you and debate some of our ideas and differences. So, Ron, welcome to the Happy Today podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I followed you on Twitter for a while and I've seen you at different MAGA events.
Oh, really? So, you've seen me in person? Where did you see me?
Well, I saw you at CPAC just on the live feed. I think you did the one in Florida, right?
Yeah, I went to CPAC in Florida and in DC. So
right.
I've been to two CPACs. The one in Florida was not very fun. It was so hot and they really did not have the air conditioning going on. And of course, with the wig and all of the getup of Lady Maga, it's very uncomfortable sometimes. So before we begin, I just have to point out something that makes me very, very unhappy. And that is that as I looked at your Twitter and your social media and, Googled you and kind of looked up what you stand for, I realized we would be talking about, of course, the pandemic. We'd be talking about, Black Lives Matter and the election and all of that. And I have to be super careful how I phrase things and what I say, because your views will not get you kicked off of social media. Mine will. So I feel like right there, I'm already at a disadvantage in this conversation because I'm worried about my YouTube channel getting taken down or saying the wrong thing, because I did an interview with a journalist yesterday who did lose her YouTube channel because she questioned the election narrative and other things. So I just have to say that I'm going to have to try to phrase things in a way that will not get me kicked off of social media, and your views will not get you kicked off. So I feel like it's a little unfair. So just please
they get me blocked.
What's that?
My views get me blocked.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And that's an individual American's prerogative to block someone that they don't like. I'm talking about actual deplatforming. I had 15,000 followers on Instagram and I was deplatformed. I lost it. So I hope that you and I agree that people should not be deplatformed and that dialogue and discussions are necessary even when we disagree with someone. So please just introduce yourself. Give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on you and your political history and what you stand for.
Sure. I was a lifelong Republican, and I was a Republican since 18 years old. I worked on political campaigns, congressional campaigns. I was a Marine. I was a state prosecutor. I was a federal prosecutor. I was a police academy director. I was president of the second largest Republican club in Florida. I was elected to that position twice by fellow Republicans. And I was appointed by Rick Scott to the Judicial Nominating Commission that helps choose judges in Florida. I was reappointed by Ron DeSantis. So up until the past year, I was 100% Republican. And then I switched parties.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service. And it sounds like you are one smart cookie. I mean, you're an attorney. You have obviously served in a lot of positions of leadership, which is, with all due respect, why I am completely shocked and just taken aback by your decision to actually join the Democrat Party. So talk to me a little bit about why you actually left the Republican Party and you now are a Democrat.
Sure. Yeah, well, I never liked Donald Trump. I mean, I've known Donald Trump followed him, not known him personally, for 35 years. I was a football fan. I followed him when he was an owner in the U.S. Football League back in the early mid 1980s. So, I grew up in New England, so Trump wasn't too far from us, and he worked very hard to get in the news quite often. So I knew who he was. I didn't like him. I never liked him very much. I never really took him that seriously. And I guess it was when he got the nomination for president. I will say that I did not vote in the 2016 presidential race. I voted in local races. I voted none of the above. And, at that point, I think like a lot of other Republicans who didn't like Trump, you would call us, I guess, never Trumpers at that point.
That's the word, never Trumper.
Yeah, I think we kind of hoped that what you would call the establishment, or maybe even the deep state, would rein him in a little bit, and he would grow into the position, moderate some of his more extreme stances, and we could come to tolerate him, those of us who didn't like him. But in fact, I felt like that did not happen, and in fact, things only got worse. And so I kind of dropped out.
What would you label as his extreme stances?
Oh gosh, I think that there's just so many. I think the biggest problem that I have with him is, we could go across the board. Foreign policy, I think he's an isolationist. I think he's against engagement in the world. He's against us being involved in closely aligned with our NATO allies, with our allies in Asia. I think it's quite clear he's always been his whole life an isolationist, where he's talked about America first and, stay out of foreign wars, no more foreign wars, all of that. So I think that's problematic. I'm not saying that we should be the policemen of the world or we should be invading everywhere, but I think that we have to be engaged and not alienate our allies and trading partners around the world. So, that's one big thing. I have an issue with him on immigration policy as well. So, I mean, we can go through a whole list of things, but
so
but
it
really
sounds like two of the top issues for you are isolationism and what you view as an uncooperative attitude toward other countries, and immigration. Those are two things.
Yeah, but it's not even as much policy. Yes, I have policy differences with Donald Trump, but that's not really my main issue. I mean, obviously, COVID was the straw that broke the camel's back for me.
Yeah,
That's what ultimately caused me to leave.
I read your resignation letter from Ron DeSantis, and it was about Rebecca Jones and the handling of COVID in Florida. So you actually resigned from working for Ron DeSantis. And now on your Twitter, I've noticed a lot of your responses on there are letting people know that you and, I don't know, your team, you are watchdogs for right-wing extremism and content, and you filter through content. You've had millions of views as you go through right-wing content to expose what you consider right-wing extremism. Is that kind of what your mission is in what you do?
Yeah, I'll explain. I got on Twitter and I was never on social media. No Facebook, no Instagram, no Twitter ever, until 75 days before the election. I decided to get on just solely for the purpose of staying on until November 3rd and getting off. And my only role there was to try and convince what I perceived as moderate establishment Republicans to cross over. And I was working, yes, with different organizations like Republican Voters Against Trump, et cetera. But that all changed after the election, when there was no concession and all the post-election stuff, which you know well. And then I started to notice the radicalization of the Maga movement, particularly with respect to challenging the results of the election. Leading up to January 6th, I saw it getting worse and worse. And then I changed my mission. And I said, I kept warning about January 6th. You can look at my post from December 19th to January 6th. I repeatedly said, there is going to be a major problem in DC on January 6th. I said it every single day, and I posted things showing the planning and everything. And then when it happened, I decided, okay, this has to be my mission from here on out.
Okay, so
yes.
do you personally believe that the so-called insurrection is one of the most dangerous and tragic events in American history?
Yes, I think it was. I think it was an attempt to overthrow the government. And
Okay.
and I would say this: that the big question that I never hear asked or get answered, and maybe you have an opinion about this, I don't know, but you're interviewing me, is what would have happened if they had actually gotten their hands on, which they almost did, Mitt Romney or Nancy Pelosi or AOC. What do you think, and what do other people who don't think it was that bad, what do you think would have happened to those congressmen or senators if that had happened?
Well, that's a fascinating question. I think that asking that question, since it did not happen, is kind of pointless. They did not harm any leaders within the Capitol, and the police let them in. Do you dispute that?
Yes, I watched the videos myself.
Okay,
Yeah.
we've all seen the videos.
There were some police who gave up. There were some police who acquiesced. I think there were a couple of police that sympathized, but I think the overwhelming majority of the police were just physically overwhelmed.
Okay, they were physically overwhelmed. Were
Right.
they had guns? Did the so-called insurrectionists have guns pointed at those police?
Oh, they were armed, but they were not armed with firearms.
Okay. Well, what happened was unfortunate. And here in Utah, we have a Black Lives Matter / Antifa leader named John Sullivan. Are you familiar with John Sullivan?
Uh, no, I thought we were talking about the insurrection,
No,
but
we are, because John, no,
this is kind
exactly.
of what
Well,
people do, is kind of take the insurrection and start talking about Black Lives
no,
Matter.
I'm specifically talking about the
No,
insurrection because John
no,
Sullivan was there in the Capitol. I'm
no, I don't
specifically
know who he
talking
is.
about the insurrection. His name is John Sullivan. He is from Utah. He is a Black Lives Matter leader. He is an Antifa leader. He was in the Capitol during the so-called insurrection in a Trump hat,
Okay.
breaking property, taking video, which he sold to CNN.
So it's your position then that undercover Antifa what really instigated this?
I think they were all causing a lot of trouble. But what I would like to say is it has been proven that this was not just so-called Trump supporters trying to have an insurrection. It was infiltrated by people like John Sullivan, agitating people, encouraging people to be violent, telling them, come this way, go in, break that window. So we actually have no idea how many of those people were from the left deliberately setting up this so-called insurrection. So just the fact that John Sullivan is proven to have been there in a Trump hat shows that this crowd not only consisted of Trump supporters and Maga people, and it's factual. So to say that this was all done only by Trump supporters and conservatives is it's false, and it's unfair to say that this was only done by Trump supporters.
Okay, if that's what you believe, I mean, I can't help you with that. All I can tell you is
it's not something I believe. It is factual
no.
that John
Well,
Sullivan
you're
was
talking
in
about
the
one
Capitol.
individual. I can't dispute one individual. I don't know. I don't have the tape in front of me. I know what I saw, and I've seen hundreds of times. I know all the social media posts from people I'm sure that you know leading up to the event, what they were saying they were going to do. Whether it was Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, 3%ers, I got them all on my phone. I got all their posts screenshotted
Good.
leading up to January 6th of what they planned. So
so
you
those,
can try and point out
people,
one or two people who you think are Antifa, but there were thousands of people there.
There were thousands of people there. Exactly. And the post that you're talking about, are you saying that the average American Trump supporter, member of the Maga movement, supported an actual insurrection and the overthrow of the government? Is that your belief?
No, I don't believe that.
Okay, well, you talked about the Proud Boys, and I've seen on your social media that you talk about them a lot, and you really consider them a threat and you consider them a dangerous group, do you have any statistics on how many people they have actually shot or killed?
No, I think that not specifically the Proud Boys, I think there's an amalgamation of right-wing militant / militia groups, and I named 3 of them a minute ago, but there's many more, and there's chapters and sub-chapters.
Yeah.
And I think that there is an increasing threat of right-wing extremists that are showing up at campaign events, that are showing up at politicians' houses, that are showing up at school board meetings, and becoming increasingly hostile, violent, and intimidating.
Can
And
you
I
give
think
can you give some
ultimately it's going to lead to something very bad.
Okay, so can you give some examples of where these alleged militant right-wing extremist groups have caused mass violence, death, shootings? Because
No.
it sounds like you're afraid of them, and you're saying that this is
I'm
going to
I'm not
happen.
afraid. If I was afraid, I wouldn't put my name on my Twitter account.
Right, but
They
you're
have
saying
my address. They have
no,
my phone number. Here I am. I'm
no,
not afraid of
absolutely.
anybody.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that, but okay, the word afraid maybe isn't fair, but you feel that they are an upcoming and legitimate threat. Now,
Absolutely.
my question is, I'm asking you to give me a specific example of where these militant, dangerous groups have damaged property, shot someone, hurt someone, terrorized a community, looted a business, and you know where I'm leading with this.
If you asked me about Lee Harvey Oswald in October 1963,
Oh, I'm not talking about 1963. I'm talking about
you're asking me
2021.
about a threat. And since I've been in law enforcement and been a federal and state prosecutor, I see people that commit crimes, that do things that are consistent with them leading up to doing worse things as time goes on. And so what I think is these groups are increasingly radicalized, heavily armed. I read what they say to each other. I post some of those things, the things that I can post. And what you said is right. Certain things that they say on alternative sites, I can't post on Twitter because they're too violent, they're too evil,
so you're talking,
that would get me banned.
So you're talking about words and ideas at this point.
Yeah, words and ideas have killed millions of people.
Well, I don't think words and ideas have ever killed anyone. I think that weapons and people have killed people. Actually, the weapon didn't kill him. People kill people. Words and ideas. Do you mean words and ideas like socialism and communism?
No.
You said
No.
on your Twitter, as a former American member of the armed services, you said that socialism is not the same as communism. Now, before you respond to that, I'd like to quote Ayn Rand. I'm a big fan of Atlas Shrugged and Ayn Rand. She said, the only difference between socialism and communism is one takes your freedom by force, the other takes it by vote. It is simply the difference between murder and suicide. So do you think that socialism is a bad idea or a good idea?
No, I'm not a socialist. But the problem I have is this. When politicians, like, you name any Republican politician these days, Marco Rubio, you name it, Rick Scott, Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump, when they rattle off radical, socialist, communist, Marxist, those are all different things. And totalitarianism and authoritarianism doesn't always go with socialism. There have been socialist governments around the world that are not authoritarian, that are democratic, that have been voted out of office. And when people on the right try and conflate socialism, like a Bernie Sanders style socialism, with brutal, oppressive, totalitarian regimes, that's utterly ridiculous.
Except that you talked about the importance and the danger of ideas eventually harming people. In countries such as the USSR and Russia and Cuba, these ideas all started and were presented as the soft, democratic so-called socialism that Bernie Sanders is pushing. So you're telling me that right-wing ideas are dangerous, and these words and ideas, you have not given me an example of right-wing extremists causing violence. And I could give you examples right here in Salt Lake City, where Black Lives Matter burned cars. They shot someone in Provo, Utah.
You said mass.
Okay.
You said mass murder. Your question was mass murder. Like,
No, my
where
question was,
many people were killed.
Give me an example
Oh,
of right-wing extremist groups causing mass mayhem, violence, destruction of property, aside from what happened at the Capitol, which we know was infiltrated by both sides. And I'm not
again,
defending what happened at the Capitol. I'm just saying that you
I
use that example without talking about the killings in inner city Chicago. If you really
okay,
cared about saving lives, you would talk about Black Lives Matter and their radical ideas. And when you
okay.
say Marxism isn't a part of it, Black Lives Matter very clearly stated that they have a Marxist agenda. And if you look up Marxism and where it has been applied throughout history, people die in the millions.
Okay, we're debating. You're all over the place with that, with what you just
Okay,
said.
rein me
You
in.
brought in Black Lives Matter and Marxism,
Oh,
and
of
I
course
don't
I
even know
did.
how to
Because if
respond.
you're going to talk about the Proud Boys being a legitimate threat in the
I
United
think
States,
I think that
and you don't
right-wing
talk about
groups
Black Lives Matter,
are legitimate threat. We're talking about different things here. Okay, you're talking about people that are rioting in response to police conduct. What I'm talking about are heavily armed extremist groups that are threatening political violence, that I am concerned is going to lead to an assassination of a politician, or multiple assassinations, or insurrections at state and local governments, school boards. They're becoming increasingly physically intimidating and violent towards local, state, and federal officials. That is my concern. I'm
where have
not
they become
concerned about
violent?
another insurrection at the
In
US
the
Capitol,
Capitol.
because I think now they're
Where,
ready for it.
where you've
But
mentioned
I'm
the word
concerned about
intimidating.
isolated incidents.
Intimidating is different than violent. You said they have become violent.
Yes, they have.
Where have they become violent? I'm just asking for
Oh
an
my God.
example.
It's all over my Twitter feed. I got videos. I posted them. I mean, all over the place. They've
Okay.
become violent.
So there wasn't anything bad enough for you to be able to recall it right now?
Specific instances?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just curious
okay, I
where.
posted a video today on my Twitter in Salem, Oregon, where two Proud Boys beat up somebody who was counter protesting. I have the video, and they were arrested. I mean, they're every day these things are happening.
Okay.
So
have you ever?
again,
Okay.
I'm not worried about
So
a mass uprising. I'm worried about isolated incidents.
okay, so my question is, I haven't seen that video. I don't know the circumstances. I was personally assaulted and punched in the stomach by Antifa in San Francisco. I did not retaliate with violence. I didn't fight back. But I have a feeling that there's more to these isolated stories that you are saying represent the Maga movement. And you are putting all Trump supporters and the Maga movement as a radical, dangerous movement. And again, I know you don't want me to talk about Black Lives Matter. I know you don't want me to talk about Portland or Seattle or inner city Chicago. But if we're looking at American lives being lost, if we're looking at businesses being destroyed, if we're looking at domestic terrorism, why aren't you talking about what is going on right now in Portland?
Portland? You want me to talk about Portland? I'm not the mayor of Portland. Look, Portland's crazy. All right, you want me to give you that? I'll give you that. Portland is nuts. Okay,
right.
But what Fox News does is loop Portland footage on a continuous basis and imply that this is multiple different cities, and they use different incidents that happen at different dates, and they put them together, and they continue to loop them to create the impression to their viewers that there's this incredible mayhem and chaos and anarchy in all of our cities, and they're just replaying Portland loops. Look, I'll give you, Portland is a mess. Okay,
it is a war zone. It is being burned.
I don't think it's a war zone.
Police officers are being shot. There is continual violence. There is absolute chaos and horror in cities like Portland, Chicago, Minneapolis, inner city Chicago, Baltimore, Seattle. And I just think it's so funny that you'll take one isolated incident, and these are isolated incidents with the Proud Boys, and you will go online and you will post that and you will say, this is the big threat, while people are being shot and killed, their businesses are being destroyed. My friends had to move out of Seattle. An elderly lady had to move out of Seattle because she was afraid for her life every day because of these nighttime riots, these masked domestic terrorists going into communities, smashing windows, killing police officers, threatening people. This is what's actually happening. And you
Okay.
choose to spend your time talking about what you consider a legitimate threat, these isolated incidences. I could go online and find hundreds and hundreds of businesses that have been destroyed. Okay. Cars that have been burned, communities that have been terrorized by Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And have you ever spoken out against Black Lives Matter's violence?
Okay. I don't view
I
a
asked you a question. Have
I
you
don't view
ever?
violence under the umbrella.
I
You
know,
said
but
Black Lives Matter violence. I'm not answering that question
oh,
because
well, then you just answered my question. You have
no,
never
because
once spoken out against Black Lives
because
Matter
I don't
violence or
think
Antifa violence.
I
Why
don't
is that?
no, because I don't think it's an organized, orchestrated, organizational violence. I think there's
Oh,
individuals within them that do violent things. But again, I'm not that what my role on Twitter, on social media is. I'm not there to talk about protests in cities. I'm not concerned about that. I have a specific mission, and my mission is to expose the radicalization of the Republican Party because of Donald Trump and others and other enablers. And that's what I do. If you want to do Black Lives Matter, feel free. But that's
okay.
and plenty do.
Well, well, you answered my question. You feel that the radicalization of conservatives because of Donald Trump is a bigger problem than cities burning and businesses being destroyed and people being killed because of protests that do carry the banner of Black Lives Matter and Antifa. I just
I
want that to
think
be clear that
I
you
think
feel
urban
that.
violence is a problem. It has been a problem for decades. Most of them are individual crimes
Uh-huh.
and or crimes committed by two or three people. And as far as that goes, yes, that's a problem. I'm in the criminal justice system. I work with it
Yeah.
every single day.
In
But
our most
I'm
violent
talking about
cities.
political violence that could change our system of government and make it authoritarian and change the American Republic as we know it. Yes, in the broader context, that is a bigger problem.
Okay, so the man here in Utah who was shot at a Black Lives Matter protest, he is dead. The potential radicalization that could, these are the words you're using, this could lead to this. Right now, we are living in a third world nightmare in the United States
I don't think
because,
so.
oh, really? Go to Portland, go to
No,
downtown, go to Chaz. You want to talk about armed militant people
I don't think
taking
the
over a
US is a third
community?
world nightmare.
Uh,
Sorry,
you don't think that
but
mass riots and fires and police stations being set on fire and police cars being flipped over in Salt Lake City is not indicative of a third world situation?
no, I don't think the United States is a third world country, and I don't think that
I
I
didn't say
agree.
that. I
Look,
said
I
we're,
condemn
we're
all
living
violence.
in
I
third
condemn
world,
all destruction of property.
but you've
I,
never spoken
but
out against any of the riots in Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, Chicago, Salt Lake City.
I'm not a politician. What do you mean? I'm not
You're
running
not.
for I'm not
You're
running for mayor in those places.
okay. You're not
I
running for
think it's
mayor in
up
those
to the
places.
local
And yet,
governments
where was
and
the
the
video?
local people to deal with those
Right.
things.
You said you shared a video of the Proud Boys allegedly hurting someone. Where did that take place?
It happened in Oregon.
Are you mayor of Oregon? Are you the governor of Oregon? You
No,
just you just said that you don't have the right to an opinion on things that are not
you know
happening
why?
in your state.
Because it's political violence. They did it outside a Planned Parenthood clinic. That's
Mhm.
the issue. They
Uh,
were trying to intimidate doctors and nurses that were providing birth control and other services. It's political violence. This is what I can't quite get you
okay,
to,
so
to
so
see the difference
so
between
all
the two.
so the violence, burning police stations, burning police cars, smashing windows, terrorizing cities, that is not political violence.
Burning
What
police
type of
stations.
what type of violence is that?
Okay. How many police stations were burned last year? You tell
Uh,
me in the United
Police stations
States.
were under threat,
How
right
many
here.
stations were burned to the ground? I saw one in Oregon. I saw one in Minnesota. You got
Okay,
you got more?
so that's two
This
right
is an
there.
epidemic that's turned us into a third world country. I mean, I don't know if you want to spend the whole time just talking about Black Lives
I
Matter,
I
but
I lived no, we don't have to talk about Black Lives Matter. I lived overseas for many years in South America and I traveled extensively in Africa. And the threat of mob violence was a regular concern. Okay. And in America, up until the George Floyd incident, I didn't live with the fear of mass mob violence in this country. So when I talk about a third world setting, that's what I'm specifically talking about. We are not there yet. And yet I've been in a hotel and I could not leave the hotel
All right, well, let
because
me give
people
you an
were marching
example.
with Black Lives Matter signs, terrorizing the community.
Let me give you an example. We have
Yes.
what, 33 million people in Florida? Why
Yeah.
don't you tell me about an incident of Black Lives Matter violence in the last year among our 33 million Florida residents? Since you want to talk about Salt Lake City,
Well,
has there been any violence in Florida from Black Lives Matter?
I
No.
love how you are so dismissive of
Oh,
violence
oh, I'm
across
not.
America.
But you
No,
said the whole
you have
US has turned
amazing,
into a riot, a war
well,
zone.
you have an amazing governor in Florida, and
Oh, that's why. They're
your
scared of
state
Ron
is
DeSantis.
safer.
Okay.
No, yeah.
All
So
right.
you're saying, okay, so Portland, Seattle, Chicago, Washington D.C., Los Angeles, and Salt Lake City don't matter because we didn't have any big incidences in Florida where the majority of people are Christian conservatives.
That's ridiculous.
Is it
That is
really?
absolutely not true.
How did they elect
Okay.
Ron DeSantis?
We have big cities in Florida, with big populations. They're not Christian conservatives.
Okay, so the
There
rest
could
of
have
it
been
doesn't matter because it didn't
any
really
number
happen
of
in
incidents,
Florida.
but there weren't, because what you guys do is you take isolated incidents of individual violence,
I don't think these,
lump it all
do you
together,
consider
and portray it
Minneapolis?
as this is the United States now.
Okay, so
You know,
Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, Los Angeles, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Salt Lake City. I would not call these isolated incidents. I would call them a national travesty that terrorized our nation for over a year. And it's still terrorizing us because people are afraid if there's a police shooting and people get angry, they're immediately going to worry that a mob, a violent mob, is going to cause mayhem in their community. And you're saying that the Proud Boys are a legitimate threat and that they are our number one concern, where
no,
factually, where are people dying? Where are they
We're-
being shot?
we're
If you
talking
cared
about
about,
two different things.
no, we're
I'm
not.
talking about politics and overthrowing the government and assassinating politicians, and you're talking about protests over police.
Okay, when have
So-
they assassinated a politician? I believe a Republican was shot by a leftist. That happened. Where and how and exactly have the Proud Boys assassinated someone, burned down a building, smashed windows? When did they do this?
I saw them try and do that. They erected a scaffold outside the Capitol and were chanting "Hang Mike Pence," and they were trying to get at him. But thankfully, the Secret Service was able to whisk him into the basement just in time to avoid having the Vice President of the United States murdered. So,
Okay.
yeah, I think that was an attempt.
Okay. Well, I would just like to point out that my inbox is filled with messages saying "hang yourself," and I have been told that the Mexican gang members in West Valley know where I live. So we can just sort of agree to disagree on this topic. I think you've made it very clear that you believe that radicalized conservatives and the Proud Boys are a much bigger and much more serious threat than Black Lives Matter and Antifa. I think you've made that very clear.
Yes, that is
Okay.
my position.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. So you say that the election was legitimate and that the idea that it was a fraudulent election is false. I just want you to clarify on that. We don't even have to debate it. Do you believe the election that Joe Biden was legitimately elected president of the United States?
Absolutely.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Now, how do you feel about voter ID?
Well, I don't think it should be mandated to show a photo ID. I can tell you, working in the criminal justice system, that I have a lot of clients who don't have IDs for a lot of reasons. Either it's financial, either they lost their birth certificate or their driver's license, they lost their driver's license for a DUI or whatever reason, and because it's a constitutional right. We didn't require voter ID for the first 200 years in this country. Nobody required you to show a photo ID to vote. Nobody who voted for Ronald Reagan, or a very few people who voted for Ronald Reagan, showed a photo ID to do it. Almost nobody, well, nobody who voted for Dwight Eisenhower, or John Kennedy, or Franklin Roosevelt, not one person ever showed a photo ID to do that.
Okay,
It's a
so
constitutional right. And so, no, I don't think photo ID, I think the mandating photo ID is an attempt to suppress people from voting.
okay,
That is what I believe.
do you believe that people who are in this country illegally should be able to vote?
Oh, absolutely not. Of course not.
Okay, so how do you verify that they're here legally if you don't present voter ID?
Well, yeah, they can't register to vote. That's the problem. They have to be
Okay,
registered.
you can register, you can go forward. So the individuals that you're talking about who are incapable of presenting an ID to vote, are you aware that they also cannot go to a bar? They cannot buy beer at a 7-Eleven. They cannot be admitted to an R-rated movie. They cannot fly on a plane. They cannot purchase cigarettes. How did they get by? How do they get by?
None of those things are constitutional rights, and that's your problem in the courts, which is constitutional rights are protected, and they fall under different standards, and there's strict scrutiny. You can't impose restrictions on a constitutional right that are onerous and are burdensome. And
Okay.
so
Is it
the
is
issue
it
is
is
with
it
all of those other
burdensome?
things,
Is it
those are
burdensome
not
to
rights,
have
they're privileges.
is it burdensome to ask that people have ID?
Well, I think most people have IDs, and it's not burdensome for 90% of people or even more, but there is a percentage of people that it is a problem. Or what if somebody lost their wallet? There's any number of things. Now, do I think there should be ballot harvesting? Do I think that there should be no restrictions or no limitations on the ability to verify someone's identity through different means? No, I don't believe that. But so you're saying you're against mail-in balloting. If you're requiring a photo ID to vote, you're against all absentee ballots then.
I think that in-person voting is critical. And I think that in 2020, COVID was used as an excuse for ballot harvesting and mail-in voting in an unprecedented way. And that is why the election was so completely questionable. Do you
So you're
support,
against you're
do you
against
support
absentee ballots?
do you support absentee ballots only in the necessary cases? And in this past election, they were not necessary for the average American citizen. They used COVID as an excuse to, you want to talk about oppressing the vote and interfering with elections. So you are very upset about Trump's handling of COVID. How do you feel about Ron DeSantis's overall handling of COVID in Florida?
Well, I had not many issues with it at first, the first month, but then I think he made the decision, along with Trump, made the calculated decision that the economy was, on a cost benefit analysis, more important to their political future than COVID deaths and COVID illness. And so I think they both made the calculated decision around May that they were going to choose the economy first and put the economy first and throw everything open. So that was one issue.
Right.
But the other issue is, the number of statements that DeSantis was making about counting COVID deaths. For example, in Florida, we have a lot of snowbirds. We have a lot of people that live here 6 months out of the year, 5 months out of the year. And they would come down here, get COVID, and he would not want to count those in Florida's stats because they're not, quote unquote, from Florida, even though they got it here. Or people who would contract COVID here and go back up north and die, he wasn't counting in our numbers. The other issue was his problem that he had with people with pre-existing conditions. He said shouldn't be counted among COVID deaths because how do we know they didn't die of their pre-existing condition? So there's all kinds of statements that he was making regarding the numbers, how to count the deaths, how to keep track of them, that I was not comfortable with.
Okay.
Because I didn't think it should be used for political purposes.
Okay, so you believe that Ron DeSantis put politics and the economy ahead of people's safety. Is that correct? Okay,
absolutely.
So unquestionably. Do you believe that every so-called COVID death that is reported is simply because they had COVID, or are there deaths where people died with COVID, not of COVID?
Well, I think that in almost every instance, maybe 99.9%, that person would not have died that day if they hadn't had COVID. Now, did a pre-existing condition make them more vulnerable? Sure, I'm sure it did.
I'm glad you brought up
COVID.
I'm glad you brought up the statistic of 99.9 because that is roughly the survival rate of this COVID virus. So do you believe that America should have been shut down on the level that it was in response to a virus with a 99.9% survival rate or 99.6?
No, I think, I've been to Europe now since COVID, and I've seen.
So you got your vaccine.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
And
good
so
for you. Good for
I've
you.
seen how it's handled a little bit in Europe, in Italy and Portugal and Greece, and so and Germany. And so I've had a chance to compare it. No, I think that it has been too restrictive in some situations, especially in terms of outdoors. We may agree on schools and young children, but I think a lot of that was a function of us. This is a new virus. We didn't understand it. We didn't have all the data. We didn't know how contagious or deadly it was. So a lot of things that the MAGA people do is they'll go back and take statements Fauci made a year ago when we didn't have all the data, and tried and say, well, back then he said this. Well, we're learning about this virus, number one, and number two, the virus continues to mutate and evolve. It's not by no means over with, and people continue to die who are unvaccinated, and I think that's a problem. And I have a huge problem with the vaccine disinformation as well. That's on MAGA social media.
Okay, so you just made your stance very clear. I don't really feel like I have to counteract everything you said, because any fact-based logical search of what has happened in this country in regards to COVID would easily dispute about 90% of what you just said. So
Okay.
we're living with fear mongering. They have used the COVID. So do you believe that vaccination should be mandatory?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, good. Well, we're agreeing on the kids,
Well,
and COVID, and there's
the
things we have
people
in
on the
common.
right are
That's
being
good.
fed disinformation about that. I can tell you, because I follow both right and left media. There's nobody. I have heard almost nobody on the left who is for mandatory vaccination. But if you only read MAGA social media pages, you would think that everybody on the left wants to force vaccines upon
Well,
you.
in
We
order
don't.
in
We
order
don't
to
care.
travel,
If
in
you don't
order
want to
to
be
travel,
vaccinated and you want to die, okay.
die.
I
So
mean,
a person who's not
we don't
vaccinated
wish that on
is
you.
going to die. They
We
have a
don't wish that on you.
99.9% chance of not dying. Do you realize that? Do you realize
Look,
that? Do you also realize
let
that
me
this
ask, you
vaccine
were a
isn't
flight
it is
attendant, right?
yes,
Were
I
you a flight
was.
attendant?
Yes, I was fired for speaking the truth.
I know. So let's say you went to the and the pilot said, listen, there's a 99.9% chance that there's a 0.1% chance we're going to crash today and you're going to die. You going to get on that plane?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well,
Because
I'm not.
there's always a 0.1%
Those aren't great
chance that
odds.
you are going to die. Flying is not
Yeah.
100% safe. So that's a
If it was
ludicrous comparison.
0.1, nobody would fly.
Okay, 0.1% chance of crashing, you're saying, or maybe I misunderstood what you're saying.
Dying if you
Of
get on the
dying.
plane.
So
Yeah.
you have a 99.9% chance of surviving the flight. You would not get on that flight?
Those aren't good odds. No, I'm not getting on a flight where there's only 99.9% chance. That's not a good odds.
Okay, I'm
You're
glad.
saying 1 in 1,000 planes are going to crash and everybody's going to die, and you're going to keep flying? I'm not.
Okay,
But you do you, and I'll do me.
I think that we should also start pointing out. I think CNN and leftist news outlets should point out that people are dying of car accidents. People are dying of diabetes. They are dying of the flu. I think there should be a scrolling death toll at the bottom of the screen for the #1 causes of death in America, and not just COVID. Do you think that would be a good idea? Should we live in fear of the top reasons people are dying in this country?
Well, here's the thing. Car accidents aren't contagious and they don't exponentially mutate. And so car accidents are generally a fixed number every year. The insurance companies know this better than anybody. We know how many car accidents there are going to be next year, approximately. But COVID, in a highly contagious, deadly disease, is unpredictable and mutatable and spreads exponentially. So that's why I think it's very different than the examples that you used.
Okay, well, you clearly live in fear of COVID. You believe that restrictions. So you're saying that the left does not want to mandate vaccines, but for example, flight attendants at Delta Airlines are not allowed to travel internationally unless they get the vaccine, even if they've already had COVID. As far as I know, don't quote me on that. I've just spoken with some other flight attendants. So it is becoming mandatory. And at our local grocery store here where I live, their employees are primarily teenagers, and they are forced to keep a mask on their face until they get the vaccine. And you yourself have said that young people are not at risk of dying of COVID. So I just, you, when you were a Republican, were you pro-life?
Yes,
You were. Okay. Do you consider yourself pro-life still?
I think so. I think in most cases, I remain that way. Look, I don't agree with Democrats on every issue. I'm sure we have a lot of disagreements on foreign policy, and I'd be happy to talk about Cuba too right now.
Mhm.
But we have a lot of disagreements over foreign
You mean
policy. I'm sure tax policy,
socialist Cuba?
all of the, I don't agree with Democrats on every issue, but yes, as far as the abortion issue, that I think that I retain my pro-life stance, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people who disagree with me on that.
Well, I think that if you voted for Joe Biden and you vote for Democrats, then you fully and wholeheartedly do not believe that partial birth abortion and aborting a 9-month-old baby is a problem. That
Oh
one,
no, I'm against that.
that one
I'm
issue right
against that.
there. That one.
No, I'm against that.
Yeah, but our,
So,
our president is not against it. And you still support him, and you support the Democrat Party and their platform. They lit up the Empire State Building in pink to celebrate the murder of a 9-month-old infant. So that one issue right there, murdering 9-month-old babies with partial birth abortion, shouldn't that be enough for you to say, oh my gosh, that's pretty serious?
no,
No.
because I don't view it as murdering babies. I don't view it that way.
Okay.
Okay.
So
And
October
I'm not
12th.
looking to outlaw abortion either. I'm not looking to make it illegal. I don't think we should do that. I'm saying individually, I personally am pro-life. I would not advocate abortion. I would not want anybody to get one. I would not encourage anybody to get one, but I wouldn't make it illegal for them to get one.
So you just to be clear, you do not believe that it should be illegal to abort a 9-month-old baby.
Oh, I do think it should be, unless, there's life of mother issues
Okay,
along those lines.
you differ from the Democrat Party, and you differ from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on
I'm
that
sure I
issue.
do.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. When it comes to the issue of socialism and communism, um, how do you feel about people like AOC and Rashida Tlaib?
I'm sure I disagree with them on 90% of things, so I mean, like, it goes back look, I'm a new Democrat. Okay, I've been a Democrat for 9 or 10 months, so I wouldn't think that I would agree with AOC on a lot of things, but I think we agreed on one huge thing, which is we felt like Donald Trump was a serious threat and the MAGA movement was a serious threat, and that our government, our American republic, was in danger of becoming an authoritarian government, and that trumped all other concerns and issues over policy in 2020, and that threat had to be extinguished.
I
It's still not,
I don't
but
think that
we've gotten a reprieve.
I don't think that in an authoritarian state, the president can be deplatformed across social media.
Oh, sure. Well, no, he couldn't. If he was successful in making this an authoritarian state, then he would ensure that
So
he
you believe
couldn't
he
be.
wanted to be an authoritarian by giving the power back to America, bringing our resource production and oil production back to the United States, empowering the American people to make more money, to have more opportunities, to live more safely. That I don't think that a dictator wants that for their people. I think they want them to be poor. I think they want them to depend on the government, because if you're going to have a totalitarian system, it is a prerequisite for that you provide the resources to the people and
Well, you
control
just
them.
did it
And
again,
Donald
where
Trump.
there's a difference between authoritarian and totalitarian. Okay. I don't
Okay.
think that Donald Trump wanted a totalitarian regime. I think he wanted an authoritative regime where he would remain in power and essentially be the power in this country until he decided not to.
Okay, well, I feel and believe the complete opposite. I felt empowered as an American. I felt that my best interests and my freedoms were being protected under Donald Trump. I did not feel that he was out to control my life and control the American people. Can I
I
ask
wanted to
you?
ask you, I just
Yeah,
want to ask you a question, if
of
you don't
course.
mind,
Yeah, of
because you've been
course.
asking me.
Yes.
I have a big question that I don't know the answer to about the Republican Party today, and I'm curious. I think 2020 elections are going to answer this question, but I'm interested to hear your view.
2022, you mean?
2022, that's
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
meant.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think, from my own observation of watching this at the grassroots level, Donald Trump definitely brought in a lot of new people into the Republican Party who had either never been involved in politics before, or were soft Democrats or independents or whatever. I will grant you that he absolutely did, and that produced some electoral victories around the country for other people as well. I agree with you. His turnout in 16 and 20 of those people helped other Republicans when he was on the ballot. But I think what that also did is cause a lot of people like me, who were the establishment Republicans, to leave, which we were labeled, rhinos and get the hell out. And many Republicans were happy to see us
Well,
leave,
I
which is
wouldn't
fine.
I wouldn't say get the hell out, but I would label
But
you as a
so
former
my
rhino.
question for you is this:
Yes.
when Donald Trump is not on the ballot in 2022 anywhere, are the MAGA people who came into the Republican Party because of Trump, are they going to turn out and vote in the Georgia governor race? Are they going to, in general election, if Brian Kemp is the Republican nominee and he beats Vernon Jones in the primary, are those people going to vote for Brian Kemp in November 2022?
I really actually appreciate that question, because you see, I'm Lady Maga, and I was very galvanized by the whole, Trump Maga movement. But I do not put my faith in one political leader. Big fan of Donald Trump. I'm also a big critic of many of the things that he said and some of his policies, especially in the early times around COVID and a lot of things. But no, if Donald Trump is not on the ballot, my faith is in the Constitution. My faith is in our First Amendment. My faith is in our Second Amendment. So no matter who is on the ballot, I'm going to do my homework, because I'm not voting for a personality. I'm not voting for one person. I'm voting for the fundamental principles of our
But
constitutional republic.
I want to ask you, though, not just about yourself, but about a lot of the people who say, and you've heard it and so have I, I'm not a Republican, I'm a Donald Trump supporter, right? Or, hey, I'm only here because of Trump. My question is people with that kind of thinking, which is a good chunk of the Republican Party today, are they going to show up and support other Republican candidates? Are they going to vote for Marco Rubio? Because I'll tell you, every time I go to a MAGA rally, people don't like Marco Rubio, and those are in Florida. Okay, are they going to vote for him? Because I think what the Republican Party has done is they've sacrificed a lot of loyal institutional Republicans who have been there for 30, 40 years every election for very fickle people who are enamored and in love with Trump, who are not necessarily going to support other people. So that's
Right,
the question that I have.
so you're sort of talking about the cult of personality, and you see the pro Trump stuff. I feel I can only speak for myself, but I can also speak as somebody who has been to coming up on 100 different conservative events. Many of them were not Donald Trump focused, log cabin Republicans and other events. And I would say that the majority of conservatives that I work with, and like the patriot community here in Utah and even in my social media, our primary concern is defending our constitutional republic and our constitution. And we felt that Donald Trump definitely legitimately attempted to do that. So I would say no. I think what Donald Trump is, he awakened a political awareness in people. And whether Donald Trump was the reason that they became politically aware or even interested in politics, that interest is not going to go away, because we see what the radical left is doing. We feel the threat in our communities. We see critical race theory being taught to children. We see transgender hormones irreversible procedures being pushed on children, mastectomies, castrations. So they are awakened to the leftist actual radical agenda now. So I think that whether or not Donald Trump is running, they are woke, for lack of a better word. They're awake.
Mhm.
And so, no, I don't think they will give up on voting. I don't think they will give up on politics. I know that I wouldn't. If
But will
tomorrow,
they,
if, will
but
they,
will they vote for a Republican candidate who's not MAGA?
I, that
If
is
they're
a,
the nominee
that's
of
a,
the party.
that's a good question. One of my qualifications, if I like a politician or not, is did they support Donald Trump? Did they defend Donald Trump? And so definitely I would go with someone who is MAGA, who definitely supported the president. But if I did my homework, which is my duty as a
Well, you're in
citizen,
Utah, right?
yeah, uh-huh.
So what if it was Mitt Romney won the Republican nomination and was running against a Democrat? What
Yeah.
would you do?
Um, I would have to really sit down and decide if this is the lesser of two evils, or if I just wanted to make my voice heard and write in a candidate that I believed in, or maybe consider libertarian or something like that. But Mitt Romney, I could not bring myself to ever vote for someone like Mitt Romney. I just could not do it. But I still would vote, and of course, I would try and use my voice to critique him. I'm not a blind loyalist Republican, quite frankly. You and I are both very disenchanted with the Republican Party for very different reasons,
That's right.
obviously,
You're
very
right.
different reasons. But I am a Republican out of political necessity. I feel like you can't just be right, you have to be effective. And so by aligning myself with the Republicans, I feel like it's the most effective way to defend the Constitution in our country. But I don't like, well, it's funny. I don't like the Republican Party right now at all, for the exact opposite reasons that you don't like it. But that's a
You know,
that's
I
a
think
that's a very serious question, because if someone is in the MAGA movement simply because they love President Trump, they love the camaraderie, they're uneducated, and that's not a reason to support Donald Trump. I took a long time researching everything before I publicly aligned myself as a drag artist with Donald Trump and with his policies. So I feel like everybody if they're just in it for the cult of personality, whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump or anyone, that's very dangerous. That's very irresponsible.
I'm also curious to ask you one other question.
Of
What,
course.
you know, we're both not, I'm a non-traditional Democrat.
Yeah.
You're probably a non-traditional Republican, maybe. What kind of reception do you get when you go in drag to a MAGA rally? I'm
Oh,
curious. Is it mixed,
um,
or is it what?
there has been one incident, and I've literally traveled the country from New Mexico Trump rally to CPAC to Politicon to local rallies. There was one time when the Groypers, I don't know if you've heard of Nick Fuentes.
Of
Uh,
course.
yeah, they had their little group, and they decided to chant shame in their megaphones at me. In all honesty, that is the one and only time that I have been treated with disrespect. I show up at a MAGA rally, and it's immediate. It's exhausting, because can I get a picture with you? Lady MAGA, we follow you. This is so awesome. This is what we need. We need the big tent. We need more diversity. And they embrace me. They love me, and they hug me. They take pictures with me. Sometimes people cry. And a lot of mothers, actually, no matter what event it is, I always have at least one or two mothers who come to me and say, I have a gay son, or I have a gay daughter. And to just see you here gives me hope that they will try to understand that I don't hate them, and that they are special and loved. So the reception, honestly, is just love and hugs. And I
But
mean, I
but
can get some off looks, like people who don't get it, but
can I
uh,
follow up though?
yeah, of
Because,
course, of course.
I've been in at these things too, and
Yeah,
almost my whole life, not necessarily Trump rallies, but you got to understand that there's a big percentage of people in the Republican Party who look at you, especially among evangelicals, who would say this is immoral, this is against nature, this is not right.
yeah.
So
I
you
I
understand that
definitely,
it's out there.
it's out there. Oh, of course it's out there. I get it. And I would say that the majority of the evangelical crowd might see me and be afraid. The reason that I forgive them and I understand where they're coming from is because they associate me with people like the Gay Men's Chorus in San Francisco, literally saying, we will come for your children. We will convert your children. They see drag queens doing drag queen story hour, doing a strip show, teaching children to twerk. And so they have a misunderstanding of who I am. But anybody, I've done a lot of podcasts with really right religious people. And if they listen to my podcast and they understand that I believe in tolerance and diversity, even for people who might think that I'm going to hell, I just ask for the balance between my secular freedoms and their religious freedoms. So I would not say the majority of Republicans feel that way. The majority of Republicans just want people to come together and to save our country, save our Constitution. And they are ready and willing to welcome more and more voices that are, as you said, non-traditional Republican. And the only thing that makes me non-traditional in my conservatism and my political views is that I'm gay and I'm a drag artist. That really is it. Underneath, I am a red-blooded American patriot who loves this country. And most people can see through that. And some people don't like the drag or whatever, but it's what I love to do. And I refuse to just like try to fit a mold, because individualism is the foundation of America. And I try to just be myself, and I treat everybody with kindness and respect. And of course, I've been called, you're going to hell, you're an abomination, all these sorts of things. And I just dismiss it by saying, you actually don't know me. And if you did, you wouldn't be saying those things.
Well,
But
hopefully we can finish on a positive note, because I have to go to court now, by
yeah,
saying
okay.
that I hope that you do some good in that respect, and you change some attitudes and change some hearts within the MAGA movement regarding that issue. And I think you probably already have. So.
Yeah, well, it's at the end of the day, truly, I just view everybody, whether you're black, white, gay, whatever, we just have to unite under the American flag and come together. And I'm sure deep in your heart, that's what you hope for too. And I'm really sad that such an intelligent, articulate veteran like you did walk away from the conservative side of things in the Republican Party. But I really, really appreciate this dialogue and this conversation. And
I do as well.
I wish you all the best, and I don't hate you. And I think you're following your heart and your conscience to the best of your ability. We are diametrically opposed on almost everything that we've discussed, but I think dialogue like this, being civil, is so necessary. Echo chambers are pointless. So God bless you. You're off to court, and stay cool down there in Florida in the swampy, humid air. I could never survive in drag. It would melt off in 2 minutes. All right.
All right. Thanks.
God
Thanks
bless
for
you.
having me on your podcast.
Of course, it was an honor. You take care.
Bye.